I've always hated cemeteries. Ironic that I come here every Saturday now. When I was a construction inspector in Danville, I used to avoid this place. Now I sit on the bench across from Agatha's grave and talk to her like she can hear me. Agatha, today are your favorite chrysanthemums, I say, adjusting my glasses. Remember how you always said chrysanthemums were for the living, not the dead? But I think you'd like them. 15 months have passed since I buried my wife. 15 months of empty headstone talk. I know she can't hear me, but I come anyway. Maybe it's me listening to myself. At home, no one listens to me. Not my son, not my grandchildren, and especially not my daughter-in-law. Especially my daughter-in-law. Every time I return from the cemetery, I promise myself that I will stop visiting my son. But every Sunday, Ambrose calls, and I hear in his voice what I want to hear, warmth and concern. I kid myself, but I go anyway. And then I endure Lorelei's barbs and my grandchildren's indifference all evening. This Saturday, I sat on the bench again and looked at the gray granite stone that had become my interlocutor. I am 73 years old, 47 of them spent with Agatha. Now there is only a slab of life dates and a cold emptiness in her place. Lorelei asked me again today if I'd like to think about a nursing home, I say, looking at my wife's portrait on the stone. She says they have great people there who know how to deal with people my age. It's like I'm some kind of broken machine that needs special treatment. The wind rustles in the treetops, and I'd like to think it's Agatha sighing and shaking her head. She's never liked Lorelei. Back when Ambrose first brought her to meet us, Agatha whispered to me, "That girl has cold eyes, Tobias." But what could I do? Ambrose looked at her as if she were the sun of his universe. "You were right about her," I said, adjusting the flowers in the vase. "I always am. Walking home is my daily habit. Dr. Burns says that at my age I should move more. It's strange that I used to walk to live longer, but now I walk to pass the time. My house is in the old part of Danville among equally old and shabby houses. A 2-story building with chipped paint and a creaky porch. Agatha always wanted to repaint it, but we kept putting it off. There's no point now. Everything inside is the same as it was when she was there. I haven't moved a single thing. I haven't thrown away a single knick-knack. Sometimes I think that if I keep everything as it was, Agatha will stay here too, in these walls, in these things. Ambrose and Lorelei live in a new neighborhood in Danville, in a modern house with big windows and fancy furniture. Every time I visit them, I feel like a stranger, like an old, shabby couch in a room full of designer chairs. I brewed myself some coffee, as I do every night, and sat by the window, going to see them again tomorrow, again to endure Lorelei's stares and the indifference of the grandchildren. For the first time after Agatha's death, Ambrose had been thoughtful. He came every day to see how I was doing. Even Lorelei was on her best behavior. But gradually, things went back to normal. Ambrose got busy at work. Lorelei remembered she never loved me. And the grandchildren simply forgot I existed. The phone rang and interrupted my thoughts. "Dad? Do you remember we're expecting you for lunch tomorrow?" Ambrose's voice sounded as hurried as ever, as if he were calling between two important things. "Of course I remember, son. I'm not old enough to forget things like that." I tried to speak lightly, but I could feel the resentment creeping into my voice. "Oh, good. Lorelei's making a roast. See you tomorrow, Dad." He hung up before I could answer. Typical of our conversations lately. Short and empty. I spent a long time this morning deciding what to wear. It was silly, of course, to worry about such things at my age, but I knew Lorelei was bound to make a comment if I looked inappropriate. Last time she'd noticed a stain on my sweater and had spent the entire evening defiantly trying to scrub it off with a napkin, saying, "Tobias, you should take better care of yourself." I chose the gray suit I'd once bought for going to the theater with Agatha and a blue tie. I looked at myself in the mirror. A thin old man with a wrinkled face and gray hair looked at me with a slight sadness. You look good, I said to myself and immediately felt foolish. Ambrose and Lorelei's house was a 20-minute drive from mine. I could have called a cab, but I decided to take the bus. Another habit that annoyed Lorelei, she thought public transportation wasn't for gentlemen. As I approached their house, I noticed that Lorelei's car was not in the driveway. Strange. Usually on Sunday, the whole family was home. I rang the doorbell and Ambrose opened the door. "Dad, you're early." He looked a little confused. "I arrived at the same time I always do," I replied as I walked into the house. "Yes, of course you did. Come on in. Lorelei, she should be back soon. She went to see her friend Helen to help with something." I nodded, even though I knew Helen was on vacation. She'd told me about it last week when we'd met at the supermarket, but I didn't say anything. In the living room, I saw the grandchildren, Thatcher and Ottilie. They were sitting there, staring at their phones and didn't even look up when I walked in. "Hello, my dears," I said with feigned cheerfulness. Thatcher mumbled something without looking up from the screen, and Ottilie looked up for a second, said hello, and went back to her phone. I remember them running to me when they were little, how they asked me to tell stories about my work on construction sites, how they sat on my lap looking at pictures in old albums. Now they're 10 and 12 and I'm just an old man they have to spend Sunday lunches with. "Papa, would you like some tea while we wait for Lorelei?" Ambrose asked, glancing nervously at his watch. "Yes, that would be nice." We went into the kitchen and Ambrose started fussing with the kettle. I knew he was nervous about his wife's absence. I knew she was delayed somewhere again and he didn't want to talk about it. "How are things at work?" I asked to lighten the mood. "It's fine," he shrugged. "The usual. Lots of projects, not much time." Ambrose worked as an architect for a large firm. He'd always been an ambitious boy, and I was proud of his accomplishments. But lately we'd hardly talked about his work. He'd just say things in generalities and change the subject. "How's your back?" he asked. "Does it still bother you?" "Sometimes, but I manage." "Maybe you should see a good specialist." Lorelei said, "Sunset Hills Nursing Home has great doctors. There it is. Here we go again. The nursing home, as if by accident in conversation. "I don't need nursing home doctors, Ambrose. I have Dr. Burns and he's doing a fine job." Ambrose wanted to reply something, but at that moment we heard the sound of the front door opening. Lorelei had returned. She entered the kitchen carrying bags of groceries. Her blonde hair was in a high ponytail, and she had a smile on her face, the same smile she always wore when she wanted to hide something. "Tobias!" she exclaimed, as if she just spotted me. "You're here." "I'm sorry. I got held up at the store. I thought I'd get some fresh vegetables for my salad." I nodded, even though I could see there were no vegetables in her bag. "That's okay, Lorelei. Ambrose and I were just talking about his job." "Oh, that's wonderful." She set the bags on the table and walked over to her husband, kissing him on the cheek. "Honey, have you told your father about your new project yet?" Ambrose was embarrassed. "No, I haven't yet." "Tobias, you have no idea how talented your son is," Lorelei continued with exaggerated enthusiasm. "His design has been chosen for a new shopping center in the suburbs. That's such an honor." "Congratulations, son." I was genuinely happy for him. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I didn't want to tell you until there was official confirmation." He was clearly uncomfortable. "But the confirmation came last week." Lorelei looked at him reproachfully. "Tobias, no offense, but Ambrose has so much on his plate that he forgets even the important things." I knew she was lying. I knew Ambrose just didn't want to share his successes with me. He'd been telling me less and less about his life lately, as if I were an outsider. "I understand," I said, trying to stay calm. "We all have our own things to do." Lorelei began to sort through the bags, defiantly ignoring me. Then she turned to the kids who were still sitting in the living room with their phones. "Thatcher, Ottilie, go help set the table," she shouted. Your grandfather is already here." The children reluctantly got up and went into the kitchen. "Hello, Grandpa," Ottilia said without looking at me. "Hello, my dear." I tried to hug her, but she dodged me and started setting the plates down. Thatcher just nodded and picked up the cutlery. I remember how much they loved it when I came over, how they asked me to tell stories about the construction sites and buildings I checked out. Now they barely noticed my presence. "Tobias, would you mind not standing in the aisle?" Lorelei asked with a strained smile. "We're trying to set the table." I stepped aside, feeling superfluous in this house. Ambrose busied himself with the roast, clearly avoiding looking at me. When we finally sat down at the table, Lorelei began to talk about her week, how she'd gone to the spa, how she'd met her friends, how she'd taken Ottilie to the dance. She talked non-stop, not letting anyone else get a word in edgewise. "How was your week, Tobias?" she finally asked when she had exhausted her stories. "What did you do?" She sounded condescending, as if she were asking a small child. "Nothing much," I answered. "Reading, going to the park, going out with friends." "Friends?" She raised her eyebrows. "You still have friends?" "Lorelei," Ambrose said warningly. "What?" "I was just asking. At his age, a lot of people are already, you know." I clutched my fork a little harder than I should have. "Yes, Lorelei, I still have friends. Not everyone dies at 70. "Of course they do," she said with a wave of her hand. "I'm just worried about you. You live alone in such a big house. It could be dangerous." And again, every conversation she somehow boiled down to the fact that I need to move. "My house isn't that big," I said, "and I'm doing just fine on my own. But what if you fall, or forget to turn off the stove?" She looked at me with fake concern. "They'd take care of you in a nursing home." "Mom's right, Grandpa," Ottilia suddenly interjected. "Miss Pratt from my school told me that her grandfather had moved into a nursing home and was now very happy." I looked at my granddaughter, surprised at her sudden interest in the conversation, but I could see in her eyes that she was just repeating what she had heard from her mother. "Thank you for your concern, dear," I said, trying not to show my disappointment. "But I prefer to stay in my own house." "You're so stubborn, Tobias," Lorelei sighed. "Just like your wife. It was a low blow. She knew how much I longed for Agatha, and she used it." "Yes, I am," I said quietly, "and proud of it." The rest of lunch passed in tense silence. The kids went back to their phones. Ambrose studied the contents of his plate diligently, and Lorelei cast irritated glances at me. When it was time for dessert, she suddenly remembered that she'd forgotten to buy ice cream. "I'm so sorry, Tobias," she said without a trace of regret. "I know how much you like ice cream." "It's okay," I said. "I'm full." "I could go to the store," Ambrose suggested, clearly wanting to escape the tense atmosphere. No, that's okay," Lorelei said quickly. "I have cookies." "Tobias, you like cookies, don't you?" She didn't wait for my answer and left the room. She came back a minute later with a packet of cookies, which I hated, and she knew it well. "Here, help yourself." She placed the plate in front of me. "Thank you, but I think I'll pass," I said. "Suit yourself," she shrugged and turned to the children. "Thatcher, Ottilia, who wants cookies?" The kids silently took one each, keeping their phones on. I felt it was time to leave. This Sunday lunch, like all the others before it, had turned into torture. "I should probably go," I said, getting up from the table. "Already?" Ambrose looked at me with slight relief. "But it's early." "I have things to do," I lied. "Thanks for lunch. I'll walk you out." He stood up and followed me to the door. Ambrose hugged me awkwardly on the way out. "I'm sorry about Lorelei," he said quietly. "She's just worried about you." I knew that wasn't true. She wasn't worried about me for a second. But I nodded because I didn't want to fight with my son. "Sure, I understand." "I'll see you next week?" he asked, opening the door. "Yes, of course." I knew I would come again, no matter what, because he's my son, and I love him. On the way home, I thought about how my life had changed since Agatha's death, how I had become an outsider in my own son's family, how Lorelei had turned me into a burden to be rid of. I've noticed that lately she's been absent a lot during my visits. Today, she was late. Last time she left in the middle of lunch, citing an urgent call from a friend. And every time she came back with a slight blush on her cheeks and a sparkle in her eyes that couldn't be explained by a simple trip to the store or a visit to a friend's house. Something was going on in my sister-in-law's life, something she was carefully hiding from all of us. And I was beginning to suspect that this something might have destroyed my son's family. When I got home, I sat in a chair by the window and stared at Agatha's picture for a long time. She was smiling at me from the picture, and I could almost hear her voice. "Tobias, you have to find out what's going on, for Ambrose's sake." And I decided that I would. Find out where Lorelei was disappearing to and why she was so insistent on getting rid of me. Tuesday was a day of revelation for me. I usually go to the city park on Tuesdays, sit on a bench by the pond, and feed the ducks. It's a small thing, but it's a habit that started when Agatha was alive. We often went there together, and now I continue to do it alone, a kind of ritual that links me to the past. The weather was overcast that morning, but it wasn't raining. I put on my old raincoat, grabbed a bag of bread, and went to the park. It was only a 10-minute walk from my house. One of the advantages of living in the old part of Danville. Danville's Central Park wasn't too big, but it was cozy. Century oaks, neat paths, a small pond with ducks, and a few playgrounds. It wasn't usually crowded this time of year, just retirees like me and the occasional young mom with strollers. I sat on my usual bench, tossed pieces of bread to the ducks, and thought about my son's Sunday lunch, about how Lorelei was late and about her strange behavior lately. I didn't want to think that my daughter-in-law might be unfaithful to Ambrose, but the suspicion was creeping in. I was interrupted by the sound of laughter coming from across the pond. A woman's laughter, familiar and out of place here. I looked up and saw Lorelei. She was walking down the path in the company of a tall man I'd never seen before. Dark-haired, with a neat beard, dressed in an expensive-looking suit. He was saying something to her, leaning in close to her ear, and she was laughing in a way she had never laughed in the presence of my son. I instinctively turned away and pulled my cap lower so she wouldn't see me. They walked past without paying attention to me and headed toward the far side of the park, where there was a small gazebo hidden from view by lilac bushes. My heart was pounding. This might just be a business meeting. Ambrose had told me that Lorelei had recently taken a job at a real estate agency. Maybe this man was a client or colleague of hers. I tried to convince myself of that, but something was telling me otherwise. I fought with myself for a few minutes. Part of me wanted to walk away, to forget what I'd seen, to stay out of it. But the other part, the part that had always cared about my son, demanded to find out the truth. In the end, curiosity and concern won out. Slowly, trying not to attract attention, I walked around the pond on another path and approached the gazebo from the side of the bushes. Through the gaps in the foliage, I could see what was going on inside while remaining unnoticed. What I saw left no room for doubt. Lorelei and the stranger were standing close together. His arm was around her waist, and she was looking at him with a tenderness I had never seen in her eyes when she looked at my son. Then he leaned over and kissed her, not fleetingly, but long and passionately. And she responded to that kiss. I felt the ground go from under my feet. Lorelei was cheating on Ambrose. My daughter-in-law, the mother of my grandchildren, was betraying my son. I didn't look any further. Quietly, trying not to crunch the branches, I stepped away from the gazebo and took a quick step toward the park exit. I needed time to reflect on what I had seen and decide what to do next. All day I couldn't find a place to go. I walked around the house, going over my options in my head. Should I tell Ambrose? But would he believe me? Lately, My son had been taking my wife's side more and more often in our conflicts. Besides, I had no proof but my word and an old man's word against a young woman's. I knew how this would end. Confronting Lorelei didn't seem like a good idea either. She could deny everything and then turn Ambrose and the children against me even more, painting me as an old man out of his mind, making up stories. By late afternoon, I realized I needed help. Someone who could gather evidence of Lorelei's treason. And I thought of Percival Hobbs. Percival was a friend of my late brother's. They served together on the Danville police force until Percival retired and opened a private detective agency. We weren't close, but we kept in touch, occasionally meeting for coffee and reminiscing about old times. The next morning I called him. "Percival Hobbs here." His voice sounded just as I remembered it, low and husky. "Percival, this is Tobias Huxley, Edmund's brother." "Tobias! It's been a long time. How are you, old boy?" "Not too bad," I stammered, not knowing how to get to the point. "Listen, Percy, I need your help. Professional." There was a pause. "Professional?" he finally asked again. "You want to hire a detective?" "Yes." I took a deep breath. "It's about my daughter-in-law. I suspect she's cheating on my son." Another pause, longer this time. "I understand," Percival said seriously. "Let's meet and talk about it in person. It's better not to discuss such things over the phone." We agreed to meet in an hour at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, where there were hardly any acquaintances. Polly's Coffee House was exactly the kind of place I had envisioned for a meeting with a private detective, quiet, with dimmed lights and private booths where we could talk without fear of being overheard. Percival was already waiting for me there, sitting at a table in the far corner with a cup of coffee. The years had changed him less than I'd expected. The same piercing blue eyes, the same gray, close-cropped hair, and the same strong build that had survived despite his age. He was about 65, but he looked younger. "Tobias." He stood up and shook my hand firmly. "Have a seat. I ordered you a coffee. Black, no sugar, if I remember correctly." "Remember." I sat down across from him. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Always for Edmund's family." He sipped from his cup. "Tell me what's going on with you." And I told him everything. How things had changed with my son and daughter-in-law after Agatha's death. About Lorelei's strange behavior lately. And finally, what I had seen in the park yesterday. Percival listened attentively, not interrupting, taking an occasional sip of coffee. When I finished, he tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. "The situation is unpleasant," he said at last. "But, unfortunately, typical. I've dealt with it dozens of times." "So, you'll take the case?" I asked. "Sure," he nodded. "But first, let's be clear about what you want. What's your ultimate plan?" I wondered. What did I want? Protect my son from his wife's betrayal, win back his favor, to punish Lorelei for her behavior. "I wanted to know the truth," I finally said. "The whole truth about what's going on, and then I'll decide what to do next." Percival nodded as if he'd expected that answer. "Good. I can set up surveillance on your sister-in-law. Find out who this man is, how often they meet, how serious their relationship is. I'll gather evidence, photos, videos, maybe even audio recordings of conversations if I can." "Is that legal?" I asked. In most cases, yes," he shrugged. "I'll only monitor her in public places. No breaking and entering, no trespassing on private property, all within the confines of the law." I nodded, feeling somewhat relieved. "How much will it cost?" Percival quoted an amount that made me wince. It was a lot of money for a retired man, but I had savings I'd been saving for Ambrose and the grandchildren. I figured it would serve them better now. "I agree," I said. "When can you start?" "Today." He pulled a notebook out of his pocket. "I'll need some information. Your son and daughter-in-law's address, their daily routines, places they frequent, and, of course, a picture of Lorelei. I gave him all the information I had." I told him that Lorelei had recently taken a job at a real estate agency called Premium Homes, that she usually took her kids to school at 8 a.m., that she used to go to the Oasis Spa on Fridays. Showed a picture taken at last year's Christmas where Lorelei stood next to the tree, smiling her fake smile. Great, Percival wrote it all down in his notebook. That's enough for a start. I'll contact you as soon as I have the first results. Don't call me yourself. If your sister-in-law is really hiding something, she might be wary. I nodded, feeling my heart pounding with excitement and fear. And another thing, Tobias. He looked me straight in the eye. Be prepared for the truth to be worse than you think, and that your son might not thank you for it. I knew he was right. I knew I was meddling in someone else's life and that it could backfire on me. But I also knew I couldn't just sit back and watch my son's family fall apart. I understand the risk, I said, but I have to do this. Percival nodded and held out his hand to me. Then let's get to work. The next few days were filled with anxious anticipation. I lived an ordinary life, going to the store, working in the garden, reading books, but my thoughts kept returning to Lorelei and her secret affair. I imagined Percival following her, gathering evidence, learning the name of that man in the park. On Friday, exactly 3 days after we met, the phone rang. Tobias, it's Percival. I have something for you. My heart skipped a beat. What was it? Not over the phone. Come to my office at 6 o'clock tonight. You know the address? I did. His office was in a small building on Maple Street, not far from downtown. I'll be there, I said and hung up, feeling my hands shaking. Percival's office was exactly as I had envisioned it, a small room with a desk, a few chairs and file cabinets along the walls. His diplomas and private investigator's license hung on the wall. Nothing superfluous, everything functional and austere. Come in, Tobias. He pointed to the chair across from his desk. Have a seat. I sat down, trying to keep my hands from trembling. Percival pulled a folder out of his desk drawer and placed it in front of me. Here's what I've learned these past 3 days, he said. Your sister-in-law is indeed seeing another man. His name is Radley Prim, and he works as a manager for the same real estate company as she does. 42 years old, divorced, no children. He opened the folder and showed me a picture of the same man I'd seen in the park with Lorelei. They meet almost every day, Percival continued, usually at lunchtime or after work. Sometimes in the park, sometimes in a cafe across town, but most often at the Pine Tree Motel on the Danville exit. He showed me a series of photographs, Lorelei and Radley entering the motel, Lorelei coming out of there 2 hours later, fixing her hair, Radley kissing her goodbye by the car. Apparently, their relationship has been going on for quite some time, Percival said. The motel staff recognizes them. They always share the same room. I felt my insides tighten with pain and anger. It was one thing to suspect, and quite another to see the evidence of betrayal in black and white. There's something else. Percival pulled a small recorder-like device out of a folder. I managed to record their conversation in the cafe yesterday. I think you should hear it. He pressed a button and voices filled the room. First I heard Lorelei's laughter, the same kind I'd heard in the park, light and carefree. Then a man's voice, low and confident. When will you finally tell him? The man asked. Soon, Radley, I promise, Lorelei answered. It's just not a good time. I have to deal with the old man first. His father? The man sounded annoyed. You've been talking about him for 6 months and nothing's changed. I'm working on it, Lorelei's voice was pleading. I almost convinced Ambrose to put him in a nursing home. Once the old man moves out, we'll sell his house and get the money for a down payment on our own. And if he doesn't agree? He will, she said with confidence. He doesn't have a choice. He's old, he'll be decrepit soon. Ambrose realizes he can't look after him, and I'm certainly not going to be a nurse to that bore. They both laughed, and Percival turned off the tape. There's more, he said. But I think you get the gist of it. I sat there, stunned by what I'd heard. It wasn't just treason. They were planning to get rid of me, to sell my house and use the money to start a new life. And Ambrose, was my son really thinking of putting me in a nursing home? What are you going to do about it? Percival asked, looking at me carefully. I didn't know. Part of me wanted to go to my son immediately to show him the pictures, to let him listen to the tape. But the other part was afraid of his reaction. What if he didn't believe it? What if he took his wife's side? I need to think about it, I finally said. This is too much to decide at once. Percival nodded understandingly. Take the folder with you, he said. And the device too. There are a few more recordings in there. Listen to them at home with a clear head, and then decide. I took the folder and the recorder, feeling their weight not so much in my hands as on my heart. Thank you, Percy, I said. You did a good job. Just doing my job, he shrugged, but I could see the sympathy in his eyes. Call me when you decide what to do next. I might be able to help. I nodded and walked out of the office, clutching the folder so tight my knuckles turned white. At home, I spread the photos out on the table and stared at them for a long time, as if trying to find some mistake in them, some proof that this was all a misunderstanding. But the longer I looked, the clearer the truth became. Lorelei was betraying my son, and she was planning to get rid of me. I turned on the recorder and listened to the rest of the tapes. In one, Lorelei and Radley were discussing how they would live together after she left Ambrose. In another, she was complaining about my son, calling him spineless and boring. In the third, they talked about the children, that Thatcher and Ottilia would probably stay with Ambrose, and that was even better, because Radley didn't like children. Every word was like a knife stab. I thought of my son, of my grandchildren, of how their lives would be ruined when the truth came out. And it would come out. Sooner or later, Lorelei would leave for her lover anyway, abandoning my family. I had to do something. But what? Tell Ambrose directly. But would he believe me? Wouldn't he think I was just trying to break him and his wife up out of personal animosity? Confront Lorelei? But what would that do but further alienate me and my son's family? I sat at the table until well into the night, going over my options and not finding the right solution. At one point, I caught myself thinking that I wished Agatha was there for me. She always knew what to do in difficult situations. But Agatha wasn't there, and I had to make the decision myself. Finally, near morning, a plan began to form in my head. A plan that would expose the truth so that Lorelei wouldn't have a chance to get away with it. A plan that would force Ambrose to see her true colors. I called Percival again. After calling Percival, I felt strangely relieved. The decision had been made, and now all I had to do was wait for the results of the investigation. Percival promised to act quickly and efficiently. I'll be watching her every day, he said. I'll try to find out how serious their relationship is and what they're planning. We agreed that he would pass the information on to me in person to avoid unnecessary phone calls. For this purpose, we chose a small cafe on the outskirts of the city where hardly anyone would recognize us. While waiting for the first results, I decided to behave as usual. On Sunday, I went to Ambrose and Lorelei's for lunch, although every glance at my sister-in-law now made me feel a mixture of anger and disgust. I tried not to show my feelings, smiling, asking my grandchildren about their affairs, discussing politics and sports with my son. Lorelei was especially sweet that day. She offered supplements, inquired about my health, even gave me a new sweater that she said she had bought especially for me. I would have been touched by that kind of care, but now I saw it as an attempt to put my guard down. Tobias, how have you been feeling lately? She asked over dessert as she put a piece of apple pie on my plate. I think you're a little pale. I'm fine, Lorelei, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. I'm in great shape for my age. Sure. She smiled, the smile I now recognized as fake and calculating. It's just that, at your age, You have to be especially careful about your health. My Aunt Patricia moved into a nursing home when she was that age, and it literally changed her life. There's such care, such conditions. Mom's got a point, Grandpa, Thatcher interjected, still on his phone. In school, they told us about nursing homes. They're kind of cool. I looked at my grandson, trying to figure out if he really thought that, or if he was just repeating his mother's words. I wanted to ask him if he really wanted his grandfather to live among strangers instead of with his family, but I didn't. Thank you for your concern, I said instead, but I prefer to stay in my house. All my memories are there. Memories? Lorelei frowned slightly as if the word had a bad taste. But, Tobias, the past is the past. You have to live in the present. And I am living in the present. I looked her straight in the eye. The present in which I want to stay in my home. She looked away first, and I felt a small victory. The meeting with Percival took place 3 days after that lunch. He called me early in the morning and told me he had the first results. We agreed to meet at the same cafe at noon. I arrived a little before the appointed time and took a table in the corner from where I had a good view of the whole room. Percival showed up at 12 sharp, with a small folder under his armpit. The results are in, and they are impressive, he said without preamble, sitting down across from me. Your daughter-in-law is indeed cheating on your son, and has been doing so for quite some time. He opened the folder and showed me the first picture. It showed Lorelei walking out of an office building in the company of a tall man. They were holding hands, and she was looking at him with a tenderness I'd never seen in her eyes when she looked at Ambrose. This is Radley Prim, Percival explained. 42 years old, works as a manager at the same real estate agency as Lorelei. Divorced, no children. According to his colleagues, he is an ambitious and rather tough person, loves expensive things and beautiful women. I took a close look at the photo. Radley Prim was the man I'd seen with Lorelei in the park. Dark hair with a slight gray at the temples, correct facial features, expensive suit. Typical, successful, middle-aged businessman. And this, Percival showed me the next picture. It showed Lorelei and Radley sitting in a restaurant, leaning across the table toward each other. Their hands were touching, and there were conspiratorial smiles on their faces. It was yesterday, Percival explained. The Golden Lily restaurant on the other side of town. They spent almost 2 hours there, then drove to a motel. The third picture showed them at the entrance to a small motel on the outskirts of Danville. Radley was holding Lorelei by the waist, and she was laughing with her head tilted back. I could feel my insides clenching with pain and anger. It was one thing to suspect. It was quite another to see the evidence of betrayal with my own eyes. I have something else. Percival pulled a small flash drive-like device out of his pocket. It's an audio recording of their conversation in the restaurant. I think you should listen to it. He plugged the device into his phone, put on his headphones, and handed them to me. I put them on and heard Lorelei's voice, so familiar and yet so foreign. I can't wait any longer, Radley, she said. This double life is wearing me down. I want to be with you, only you. Me too, sweetheart, the man's voice replied, low and confident, but we have to tread carefully. Divorce is always a messy business, and if your husband finds out about us, he won't find out, Lorelei's voice was confident. Ambrose doesn't notice anything. He's too busy with his work and too trusting. And the children? Radley asked. They might suspect something. The children? Lorelei laughed. They're at an age where they're not interested in anything but their gadgets. Besides, I raised them well. They do what I say and believe what I tell them. And the old man? Your husband's father? I tensed when I heard them talking about me. Tobias? Lorelei laughed again, but this time her laugh was harsh. He's too absorbed in his grief for his dead wife to notice anything around him. Besides, I'm doing everything I can to get him to move into a nursing home. As soon as he agrees, we'll sell his house and get the money for a down payment on our own. Are you sure he'll do it? Radley sounded doubtful. Of course, Lorelei said with the confidence of someone who was used to getting what she wanted. I've almost convinced Ambrose that his father can't live alone. A little more pressure and he'll suggest that the old man move in. And if he refuses, then we'll find another way. At his age, it's easy to create a situation where a man seems incapacitated. A little incident at home, an ambulance, worried relatives. You know what I mean? I felt my back grow cold. Lorelei didn't just want me to move into a nursing home. She was willing to do anything to make it happen. The recording ended and I took off my headphones, feeling stunned. This is awful, I said, looking at Percival. She's not just cheating on my son. She's planning to get rid of me so she can sell my house. And that's not all. Percival shook his head. Listen to the second tape. He turned the device back on and I heard Lorelei and Radley's voices again. As soon as the old man moves out and we sell the house, I'm going to file for divorce, Lorelei said. Ambrose will be too busy trying to get his father settled in the new place to resist. I'll ask for minimum alimony to make things go quickly and smoothly. And then, Radley asked, and then you and I will start a new life. Lorelei's voice was filled with anticipation. A new home, a new job, maybe even a new town. Without Ambrose, without his boring father, without all that burden. And the kids? The children will stay with Ambrose, Lorelei said as easily as if she were talking about the furniture she'd decided not to take with her when she moved. They were old enough not to need their mother's constant care. Besides, you don't like children very much, do you? Right, Radley agreed. But won't you miss them? Maybe a little. There was no regret in Lorelei's voice. But we'll be able to see each other on weekends or holidays, and most of the time they'll be with Ambrose. He's a good father, though a lousy husband. The tape ended again, and I felt the rage growing inside. Not only was this woman betraying my son, but she was willing to abandon her children for a new lover. Was that it? I asked, trying to control myself. No. Percival pulled a few more pictures out of the folder. I followed them to the motel. They spent almost 3 hours there, and then they went their separate ways. Lorelei got home about 5 o'clock that evening and told Ambrose that she'd been late for work. I looked at the pictures of Lorelei walking into the motel with Radley and then walking out of there, fixing her hair and clothes. There was a look of satisfaction on her face that was unrecognizable. How long has this been going on? I asked. More than a year, by the looks of it, Percival replied. The motel staff knows them well. They always book the same room, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. A year. A whole year my daughter-in-law cheated on my son, and I didn't notice. Too caught up in my own grief. Too busy with my own problems to see what was going on in Ambrose's family. What are you going to do with this information? Percival asked, looking at me carefully. I hesitated a moment. My first impulse was to go to Ambrose at once, to show him the photographs, to let him listen to the tapes. But what if he didn't believe it? What if Lorelei convinced him that it was all a forgery, the result of my personal dislike for her? I don't know, I admitted. I need to think about it. I understand, Percival nodded. It's not an easy decision, but whatever you choose, I'll support you. He handed me a folder of photographs and a recording device. All the evidence is here. Study them carefully and then decide. I thanked him and promised to get in touch as soon as I made a decision. At home, I spread the photos on the table and stared at them for a long time, trying to gather my thoughts. Then I listened to the tapes again, every word Lorelei had said hurting my heart, not for herself, for the son and grandchildren she was so easily willing to abandon. I didn't know what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to protect Ambrose from the truth that would destroy his world. The other part realized that he deserved to know who he was living with. My musings were interrupted by a phone call. It was Ambrose. Dad? His voice sounded tense. Can Lorelei and I come to your place tonight? We need to talk. I felt my heart quicken its rhythm. Had they found out about the investigation? Or had Lorelei decided to accelerate her plan to relocate me? Of course, son, I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. I'll expect you for dinner. I quickly stashed the photos and notes in my desk drawer, locked it, and began to prepare for the visit. I prepared a simple dinner: roast vegetables, salad, apple pie for dessert, set the table in the living room, got the best plates. The whole time I was getting ready, my thoughts revolved around the upcoming conversation. What do they want to talk about? What would I say to them? Would I be able to hold back and not let on that I knew about Lorelei's betrayal? They arrived at 7 sharp. Ambrose looked serious and a little nervous. Lorelei, on the other hand, was animated and smiled so broadly that it looked almost cartoonish. "Tobias!" She hugged me and I struggled to pull away. "It's been so long since I've been to see you. You look beautiful." "Thank you, Lorelei," I forced myself to smile. "You too." Ambrose gave me a short, tight hug. "Hi, Daddy," he said. "I'm sorry for the sudden visit." "No problem. It's always good to see you." I led them into the living room. "Come in. Sit down. I've prepared dinner." We sat down at the table and I began to put on the roast. The atmosphere was tense. Ambrose hardly looked up from his plate, and Lorelei, on the other hand, kept talking about the weather, about work, about how well I was cooking. I listened half-heartedly, wondering what was behind the chatter. Finally, when we got to dessert, Ambrose coughed and looked at me. "Dad, we need to talk about something important," he said. "I'm listening." I tried to keep a calm expression on my face. "Lorelei and I have been thinking about this for a long time." He took his wife's hand. "And we've decided that you'd be better off moving to Sunset Hills Nursing Home. This is it." What Lorelei was talking about on the tape. The first step of her plan. "A nursing home?" I acted surprised. "But why? I'm doing just fine on my own." "Of course you are, Tobias," Lorelei interjected quickly. "But at Sunset Hills you'll get a lot more than a roof over your head. There's a wonderful medical staff, lots of entertainment, socializing with people your own age. And most of all," Ambrose added, "you'll be safe there. We're worried about you living alone in such a big house. What if you fall, or you get sick at night?" I looked at my son and saw genuine concern in his eyes. He was genuinely concerned about my well-being. Unlike his wife, who was only thinking about selling my house and starting a new life with a lover. "I appreciate your concern," I said, trying to speak calmly. "But I prefer to stay in my house. All my memories of your mother are here, Ambrose. Most of my life has been spent here." "But, Papa," Ambrose looked upset, "a house is just walls. It's important that you're healthy and safe." "And I am healthy and safe here." I smiled at him. "Dr. Burns says I'm in great shape for my age. And as for safety, I have a panic button that you installed last year, remember?" Ambrose nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced by my arguments. "Tobias," Lorelei leaned across the table toward me, her eyes glowing with fake concern. "Ambrose and I had already talked it over. We've even been to Sunset Hills talking to the staff. They're ready for you any time. It's so beautiful, so cozy." "And expensive, I suppose?" I asked, looking her straight in the eye. She hesitated for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. "Money is not a problem," she said with confidence. "We'll sell your house and pay your rent for the next few years. You'll have nothing to worry about. There it is." She's not even trying to hide the fact that she wants to sell my house. I wonder if Ambrose knows that she plans to use the money from the sale not for me to live in a nursing home, but for a down payment on a new house for herself and her lover. "My house is not for sale," I said firmly, "and I'm not moving into a nursing home, not in Sunset Hills or any other." Lorelei cast a quick glance at Ambrose as if urging him to intervene. "Daddy," he put his hand on mine, "we realize this is a difficult decision, but think about the future. What's going to happen 5, 10 years from now? You can't live alone forever." "When I can't live alone, Then we'll decide. I squeezed his hand. Until then, I'm staying here. Lorelei opened her mouth to say something, but Ambrose stopped her with a gesture. All right, Dad, he said. We're not going to pressure you. Just think about it, okay? I nodded, feeling relieved that the conversation was over. But I knew this was just the beginning. Lorelei wouldn't back down so easily. She would continue to press Ambrose, convincing him that I couldn't live alone, that I needed constant care. Dinner ended in a tense atmosphere. Ambrose was silent. Lorelei smiled strainedly and talked about nothing. When they left, I sat in a chair by the window and stared out at the darkening sky for a long time, thinking about what I had learned in the last few days. My daughter-in-law wasn't just cheating on my son. She planned to destroy his family, take his house, and put me in a nursing home so I wouldn't get in the way of her plans. And she'd almost gotten her way. Ambrose was already half convinced that I'd better move out. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let her ruin the life of my son and my grandchildren. But how to stop her? How do I open Ambrose's eyes to the fact that his wife is a lying cheater, willing to leave him and the children for another man? I pulled out the photographs and notes Percival had given me and scrutinized them again. A plan began to form in my mind. A plan that would expose the truth so that Lorelei wouldn't have a chance to get away with it. I called Percival. "Percy, I need your help again," I said when he answered. "I have an idea on how to expose Lorelei. But to do it, I'm going to need your help, and maybe the help of someone you know." "I'm listening," he said seriously. And I outlined my plan to him. Percival listened carefully to my plan and shook his head thoughtfully. "It's risky," he said, "but it could work. The key is to choose the right place and the right time." We decided to meet the next day in his office to discuss the details. I spent a restless night, waking up every hour and going over possible scenarios in my head. What if the plan didn't work? What if Ambrose didn't believe the evidence? What if I only made things worse? In the morning, I felt defeated but determined. After breakfast, I went to Percival's office, which was in a small building on the outskirts of town. "So," Percival said as we sat down at his desk, "let's go over the plan again. You want to organize a family dinner at the restaurant and show the video with the evidence of Lorelei's infidelity during dinner?" "Yes." I nodded, but not right away. I want to give her a chance to prove herself, to show her true colors. Let her think she's won, that I'm willing to agree to move into a nursing home. And when she's triumphant, that's when we'll show the video. "Okay." Percival tapped his pen thoughtfully on the table. "But to do that, we'll have to find a restaurant where the video can be shown, and we'll have to make arrangements with the management." "I have an idea," I said. "Marco's restaurant downtown. They have private rooms for family dinners, and each room has a big screen for presentations. We could rent a room like that and use the screen to show videos." "That's a good idea," Percival nodded. "But we'd have to talk to the manager of the restaurant. I don't think he'd like the idea of showing a compromising video in his establishment." "Maybe we shouldn't tell him the whole truth," I suggested. "Let's say we want to surprise the family by showing old family photos and videos." Percival shook his head. "I don't think that's a good idea. If the manager finds out the truth after the fact, he might call the police or cause other problems. It's better to be honest but not go into details." We decided that Percival would talk to the restaurant manager himself. As a former police officer, he knew how to be persuasive without revealing too much information. "I'll say we're conducting a private investigation on behalf of a client, and we need to present the evidence in front of the people involved," he said. "That's true, just not all of it." While Percival was running the restaurant, I had to figure out how to get the whole family in there. It was easier than I thought. That evening Ambrose called. "Daddy," he said without preamble, "Lorelei and I would like to invite you to dinner at the restaurant this Saturday, to talk quietly, without hurry, and maybe come to some kind of decision about, you know." I did. Lorelei was still trying to convince me to move into a nursing home. "Sure, son," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I'd love to. What restaurant? Lorelei suggests the Golden Lily, Ambrose said. It has good food and a quiet atmosphere. The Golden Lily is the restaurant where Lorelei met Radley. Interesting choice. How about Marco's? I suggested it. I've been wanting to go there for a while. I hear they have great steaks. Marco's? Ambrose thought about it. Yeah, I think that's a good option. I'm in. I'm sure Lorelei won't mind either. Great, I said. Will the children be with you? Children? Ambrose clearly wasn't expecting that question. No, we thought this would be an adult conversation. I understand, I said. But I don't get to see my grandchildren very often. Why don't we take them with us? I miss them. There was a pause. I could almost see Ambrose weighing the pros and cons in his mind. All right, he said at last. We'll take the children. Thatcher and Attilia miss you too. I knew that wasn't true. The grandchildren had barely noticed my existence lately, but that didn't matter. The important thing was that they would be at dinner. Wonderful, I said. I'll see you Saturday then. What time? 7 o'clock, Ambrose said. I'll make a reservation. No, let me, I said quickly. It will be my treat. I'll organize it. Are you sure? Ambrose sounded doubtful. It's not necessary, Papa. I insist, I said firmly. Let me do it for you. Ambrose agreed and we ended the conversation. I called Percival at once and told him the news. Great, he said. I've already spoken to the manager of the restaurant. His name is Vincent and he's agreed to help us. We can book a private room and use their equipment to show the video. What did you tell him? I asked curiously. The truth, Percival grinned. Well, part of the truth. That we were conducting a private investigation into adultery, and we needed to show evidence to the people involved. He didn't ask any unnecessary questions. Apparently, he's had a few of those in his restaurant. The next day, Percival and I met at Marco's restaurant to personally tour the office and check out the equipment. Vincent, the restaurant manager, was a short, full man with attentive eyes and a professional smile. Mr. Huxley, Mr. Hobbs, he greeted us and led us to a separate office at the back of the restaurant. This is the office you have reserved for Saturday. It can accommodate up to 8 people. The screen, as you can see, is positioned so that it is clearly visible from all seats. The study was perfect for our purposes. Cozy, but not cramped, with a large table in the middle and a screen on one wall. The windows were draped with heavy curtains, creating a sense of privacy. Great, Percival said. How does the video playback system work? Vincent showed us a small control panel built into the wall next to the door. You can plug your laptop or flash drive into this port and the image will be streamed to the screen, he explained. The sound comes through speakers built into the walls. The quality is very good. We tested the system by plugging in Percival's flash drive with a test video. Everything worked flawlessly. The picture was sharp, the sound clear. Now for the show itself, Percival said. We need the video to start at a certain point, on cue. Vincent nodded understandingly. That can be arranged. One of our staff can be outside the office and start the video when you give the signal. For example, you can press this waiter call button. He pointed to a small button on the table. It will look natural, as if you were just beckoning the waiter. Perfect, Percival nodded. One more thing. Once the video starts, we need no one to enter the office and interrupt the viewing, even if it gets noisy. Vincent nodded again, his face remaining professionally impassive. I understand. I'll instruct the staff not to disturb you until the video is finished. And if necessary, we have security guards who can intervene in the event of any emergencies. We discussed a few more details, the menu, the positioning of the guests at the table, the time the food would be served. Vincent wrote down all our wishes and assured us that everything would be organized exactly as we wanted. As we left the restaurant, I felt a strange sense of relief. The plan was beginning to take shape. What now? I asked Percival. Now we have to prepare the video itself, he replied. I've selected the most compelling pieces of footage and photographs. We'll edit them into one video about 5 minutes long. That should be enough time for your son to see and hear the truth. I nodded, feeling the tension rising inside. In 3 days, my family's life will change forever. Ambrose will find out that his wife is a lying cheater, ready to leave him and the children for another man. Thatcher and Attilia will see that their mother planned to leave them. It will be painful, very painful for all of them, but maybe that pain will save them from more pain in the future. Are you sure you want to go all the way? Percival asked, looking at me carefully. It's not too late to stop, I wondered. Did I really want to shatter my son's illusions? To show my grandchildren that their mother was not who they thought she was? But the alternative was even worse, to let Lorelai continue to deceive everyone and then abandon the family, leaving behind more pain and destruction. I'm sure, I said firmly. It's the only way to protect my family. Percival nodded without arguing. He understood that it was my decision and he respected it. We spent the next 2 days preparing the video. Percival had enlisted a friend of his, an editing expert, to help us create a 5-minute video that included the most compelling evidence of Lorelai's infidelity and her plans for the future. On Friday night, the day before dinner, Percival and I watched the finished video in his office. It began with pictures of Lorelai and Radley entering the motel, followed by shots of them meeting in the restaurant and park. This was followed by audio recordings of their conversations, first about Lorelai cheating on Ambrose, then about her plans for me in the house, and finally about how she was going to leave the kids and start a new life with Radley. The video was short but compelling. There could be no doubt about its authenticity. Lorelai's face was clearly visible in all the photos, and her voice on the audio recordings was easily recognizable. What do you think? Percival asked when the video was over. Painful to watch, I admitted. But it's the truth, and Ambrose needs to know it. Percival nodded and put the video on a flash drive. Here, he said, holding it out to me. Tomorrow, I'll be at the restaurant beforehand, checking the equipment again and ready to run the video on your signal. You'll be there? I was surprised. But how do we explain your presence? I won't be in the office with you, Percival explained. I'll be nearby, in the back office, where I can monitor the situation. Vincent had already organized everything. I was relieved. Percival's presence, even behind the scenes, gave me confidence. Thank you, Percy, I said sincerely, for everything. You're welcome, he shrugged. Just doing my job. Besides, I always said I never trusted your sister-in-law. There's something about her. Fake. I smiled, remembering Agatha saying almost the same thing. She never trusted Lorelai either. I woke up early on Saturday with a feeling that something important was going to happen today. The day stretched agonizingly slow. I tried to read, watch TV, even work in the garden, but my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming dinner. At 5 o'clock, I began to get ready. I showered, shaved, put on my best suit, the dark blue one with the blue tie that Agatha had once given me. I looked at myself in the mirror. An older man with gray hair and a wrinkled face looked at me with determination in his eyes. Today, Agatha, I said out loud as if she could hear me, today I will protect our family. At 6:30, I hailed a cab and went to the restaurant. Percival was already waiting for me there, in the small office next to our office. Everything's ready, he said. The equipment has been checked. The video has been uploaded. As soon as you press the waiter button, the show will start. I nodded, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. What if Lorelai tries to stop the video or leave the office? Don't worry about that, Percival patted my shoulder. The doors will be locked as soon as the show starts. No one will be able to leave until it's over, and the restaurant security will be on standby if things get out of hand. That calmed me down a bit, though I was still nervous. I made my way into the office and sat down in my seat, at the head of the table, across from the screen. The table was beautifully set, with a vase of fresh flowers in the center. Everything looked festive and solemn, which was a strange contrast to what was about to happen. At 6:55, there was a knock on the door and Vincent entered the office. "Mr. Huxley, your family has arrived," he said. "I'll show them to you in a minute." "Thank you, Vincent." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Is everything ready?" "Everything is ready, sir." He nodded professionally. "On your signal." He stepped out, and a few seconds later the door opened again. Ambrose, Lorelei, and the children, Thatcher and Ottilia, entered. Ambrose looked tense. Lorelei was flashing her fake smile, and the children, as usual, were engrossed in their phones. "Daddy!" Ambrose hugged me. "You're here now, and you look great." "Thanks, son." I patted him on the back. "It's good to see you all." Lorelei came over and kissed me on the cheek. I could smell her perfume, too sweet, too cloying. "Tobias, what a beautiful office you've chosen," she said, looking around. "And so cozy, the perfect place for a family dinner." "I tried," I replied, trying to keep my voice normal. "Thatcher, Ottilia, come say hello to Grandpa." The grandchildren reluctantly got off their phones and came over to me. I hugged them, feeling them tense at my touch. They had once loved my hugs, running toward me when I came to visit. Now I was almost a stranger to them. "Have a seat." I indicated the seats around the table. "I ordered your favorite dishes." We sat down, I at the head of the table, Ambrose on my right, Lorelei on my left, the children beside her. Perfect positioning for watching a video. Everyone would have a good view of the screen. The waiter brought appetizers and wine for the adults, juices for the kids. The conversation started out strained, about the weather, about school, about work. Gradually, the atmosphere lightened a little, especially after Ambrose had had a glass of wine. When the main courses arrived, Lorelei decided to move on to the main topic of the evening. "Tobias," she said, cutting off a piece of steak, "we're so glad you agreed to have dinner with us tonight, especially since we have an important topic to discuss." "Yes, of course," I nodded, taking a sip of wine. "The nursing home, I assume." "Exactly," she smiled, as if I had answered a difficult question correctly. "Ambrose and I have given it a lot of thought, and we think Sunset Hills is the perfect place for you. We've even organized a tour there next week so you can see for yourself." "That's very nice of you," I said. "And then what? After I move to Sunset Hills?" "Well," Lorelei glanced at Ambrose, "we thought it would be wise to sell your house. It's too big for one person. It requires constant upkeep. The money from the sale could be used to pay for you to live in Sunset Hills." "I understand," I nodded, as if seriously considering her words. "How much do you think my house is worth?" "We haven't done an official appraisal yet," Lorelei said quickly, "but given the location and size, I'm guessing at least $350,000, maybe even $400. I saw her eyes light up at the mention of the amount. Money she was already mentally spending on a new life with Radley. "That's a lot of money," I said. "Enough for the nursing home and for other needs, I suppose?" "Of course," she didn't see the catch in my words. "Your living in Sunset Hills will be fully provided for, and the rest of the money can be invested or used for family needs." I looked at Ambrose. He looked uncomfortable, clearly out of sorts. The children continued to eat, showing no interest in the conversation. "And when do you plan to have me move in?" I asked. "The sooner the better." Lorelei moved forward, sensing that I was close to agreeing. "Maybe as soon as a month from now? There's a vacancy at Sunset Hills right now, but it's filling up fast." I nodded slowly, as if considering her words. Then I set my glass on the table and looked at her. "You know, Lorelei, I've been thinking about this for a long time, about the nursing home, about selling the house, about family needs." "I?" She looked at me eagerly, almost eagerly. "And I've made a decision," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "But before I make it, I'd like to show you something Something that might change your mind about a lot of things. I pressed the waiter button. That was the signal for Percival. Lorelei looked puzzled. Show us? What do you want to show us, Tobias? At that moment, the lights in the office dimmed slightly, and the screen on the wall came to life. The first frames of the video appeared before us. Lorelei and Radley entering the motel, holding hands. Lorelei froze with her mouth open, staring at the screen. It clearly showed her and Radley entering the Pine Forest Motel. The date and time in the corner of the frame left no doubt that the recording was up to date. What? What is it? She finally squeezed out, turning to me. I stared at the screen in silence as the images changed. Lorelei and Radley sitting in the restaurant, holding hands, kissing in the park, entering the motel again, on a different day. The date in the corner of the screen changed, but the characters remained the same. Ambrose sat motionless, his face gradually pale. Thatcher and Ottilie pulled away from their phones and stared wide-eyed at the screen and at their mother. "Turn it off!" Lorelei jumped up from her seat. "Turn it off now!" She rushed to the door, but found it locked. Then she rushed to the screen, trying to find a way to stop the video, but Percival had thought of that too. There were no buttons or wires in sight. In the meantime, the audio was playing on the screen. Lorelei's voice, slightly distorted by the recording device but still recognizable, filled the room. "I can't wait any longer, Radley. This double life is wearing me down. I want to be with you. Just you. Me too, honey, but we need to proceed with caution. Divorce is always a messy business, and if your husband finds out about us, he won't find out anything. Ambrose doesn't notice anything. He's too busy with his work and too trusting." Ambrose flinched when he heard his name. His hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. Lorelei. His voice was quiet, but he could hear the tension in it, ready to explode into rage. "What does it mean?" "It means nothing." Lorelei turned back to the table, her face contorted with anger. "It's a fake. Your father set this whole thing up to turn you against me." But at that moment, a new scene appeared on the screen. Lorelei and Radley in the cafe, their faces close up and again their voices, crystal clear. "And the children?" Radley asked. "The children?" laughed Lorelei. "They're at an age now where they're not interested in anything but their gadgets. Besides, I raise them well. They do what I say and believe what I tell them." Thatcher and Ottilie turned to their mother in sync, shock and incomprehension on their faces. "Mom!" Ottilia's voice trembled. "What are you saying?" Lorelei gave her daughter a pained look, but she didn't answer. Her eyes darted around the room as if looking for a way out of a trap. And the tape continued. "And the old man? Your husband's father? Tobias? He's too immersed in his grief for his dead wife to notice anything around him. Besides, I'm doing everything I can to get him to move into a nursing home. Once he agrees, we'll sell his house and get the money for a down payment on our own." I watched Ambrose's face change from shock to anger, from anger to pain. He looked at his wife as if he was seeing her for the first time. "So that's why you were so insistent on the nursing home for Dad," he said quietly. "Not out of concern for him, but to get his home." "No, Ambrose, you don't understand." Lorelei walked over to him, trying to take his hand, but he pulled away. "It's not true, it's—" But she was interrupted by her own voice on the screen. "As soon as the old man moves out and we sell the house, I'll file for divorce. Ambrose will be too busy trying to get his father settled in the new place to resist. I'll ask for minimal alimony to make things go quickly and smoothly." "And then?" Radley asked. "And then you and I will start a new life, a new house, a new job, maybe even a new town. Without Ambrose, without his nerdy father, without all that burden. And the kids? The kids will stay with Ambrose. They're old enough not to need their mother's constant care. Besides, you're not really fond of children, are you?" "True, but won't you miss them?" "Maybe a little, but we'll be able to see each other on weekends or holidays, and most of the time they'll be with Ambrose. He's a good father, though a lousy husband." There was dead silence in the study. Ottilia began to cry, quietly, almost silently. Thatcher sat motionless, his face white as chalk. Ambrose stared into the space in front of him as if seeing nothing. Lorelei stood in the middle of the room, her arms hanging powerlessly along her body. She was no longer trying to deny the obvious, no longer looking for excuses. The truth was too obvious, too irrefutable. The video ended, the screen faded, and the office became light again. I looked at my family, broken, shaken, and felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness that they had to learn such a bitter truth, and relief that the lie was finally over. "Yeah, I can explain," Lorelei finally said. Her voice sounded weak, uncertain. "Explain what?" Ambrose raised his eyes to hers, pain in them. "How you cheated on me with that, Radley. How you planned to get rid of my father and sell his house. How you planned to abandon our children. What exactly do you want to explain, Lorelei?" "You don't understand," she shook her head. "I was miserable. You never gave me what I needed. Always work, 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 and Radley. He understands me, appreciates me. And the children?" Ambrose's voice shook with restrained anger. "Were you going to leave them too because I didn't appreciate them?" "I wasn't going to leave them," Lorelei exclaimed. "I would see them when it was convenient for you and your lover," Ambrose interrupted her. "When you had a spare moment in your new life." Lorelei did not answer. She stood with her head down as if in surrender. "And you, Papa?" Ambrose turned to me. "Did you know about this? How long ago?" "Not long ago," I answered honestly. "I saw them together in the park by chance and decided to check my suspicions. I hired a private detective who collected all this evidence." "And you decided to put on this, performance?" I could hear the resentment in his voice. "Why didn't you come to me first?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me," I said softly. "You would have thought I was making it up because I disliked Lorelei. You needed hard evidence, and I provided it." Ambrose was silent for a moment, considering my words. Then he nodded slowly. "You're probably right," he said quietly. "I wouldn't have believed it. I was blind." "Papa?" Ottilia wiped away her tears. "Did Mommy really want to leave us?" Her heart clenched with pain for her granddaughter. She was still a child, despite her 12 years and her ostentatious adulthood. "Your mom was confused," I said, trying to soften the blow. "People sometimes say things they don't mean." "No, Grandpa," Thatcher interjected, his voice sounding unexpectedly firm for a 10-year-old boy. "Don't feel sorry for us. We heard what she said. She wanted to leave us because her new friend doesn't like children." Lorelei flinched at those words as if she'd been punched. "Thatcher, baby, that's not true." She took a step toward her son, but he pulled away. "Don't call me that," he said coldly. "You lied to us all the time. Children, please." Lorelei turned to both children, tears welling up in her eyes. "I love you. I would never leave you." "But you were going to." Ottilia looked at her mother with dry eyes. "We heard it ourselves." Lorelei looked helplessly back at Ambrose as if seeking support, but he turned away. There was a heavy pause. No one knew what to say next. All the cards had been dealt, all the masks removed. "What now?" Lorelei finally asked, her voice sounding tired and defeated. "Now?" Ambrose rose from his seat. "Now you pack your things and leave. To your Radley, to your new life. Without me, without the children, without the house you plan to get by selling my father's house." "Ambrose, please." She tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. "Let's talk when things have calmed down. We can make things right. Fix it?" He grinned bitterly. "What exactly do you want to fix, Lorelei? Your betrayal? Your plans to abandon your children? Your desire to send my father to a nursing home to take over his estate? Which of these do you consider fixable? She didn't answer, just lowered her head. I'll file for divorce, Ambrose continued, and I'll ask for full custody of the children. Given this evidence, he nodded at the blacked-out screen, I think the court will be on my side. You can't take my children away from me, Lorelei sounded panicked. They're mine. They're not things, Lorelei, he said quietly. You can't take them away. But you said yourself that you wanted to keep them with me, that you didn't need them in your new life. That's not what I meant. She raised her voice. You're taking my words out of context. What context can explain what we've all heard? Ambrose shook his head. That's enough, Lorelei, just enough. He turned to the children. Thatcher, Ottilia, we're leaving. Now. The children stood up without looking at their mother. Their faces were closed, their eyes dry. They looked older than their years, as if they had grown several years older in the last half hour. Dad, Ambrose said to me, are you with us? I shook my head. No, son. I've got some things to finish up here. I'll come back later. He nodded, realizing I needed time. Okay, I'll see you at home. He took the children by the hands and led them to the door. Lorelei made a movement as if she wanted to follow them, but then stopped, realizing the futility of the gesture. The door closed behind them, and it was just Lorelei and me. She stood in the middle of the room, looking suddenly small and lost. Why did you do that? She asked quietly. Why did you destroy my family? I didn't destroy your family, Lorelei, I answered calmly. You did it by your own actions and decisions. You've always hated me, she said bitterly. From day one. No, I didn't hate you. I hoped you would make my son happy, but you chose a different path. You know nothing about us. She suddenly became a screamer. You don't know anything about our marriage, about our problems. Maybe, I agreed, but I know that cheating and lying are not the solution. You, she was choking with anger. You've disgusted me since day one. Old, boring, always meddling in my business. You think you know everything, that you have the right to judge, but you're just a miserable, lonely old man who's jealous of other people's happiness. I looked at her calmly, feeling neither anger nor resentment. Her words couldn't hurt me because they didn't contain any truth. Finished? I asked her when she stopped breathing. Yes. She sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted by her outburst. Finished. I stood up, adjusted my tie, and took my coat from the back of the chair. Goodbye, Lorelei, I said. I hope you find what you're looking for, but I'm afraid there will be no happiness in it. I turned and went to the door. Before I went out, I turned around and looked at her one last time. She sat motionless, staring into the void in front of her, a woman who had lost everything because of her greed and selfishness. Percival was waiting for me in the hallway. Everything went as planned, he said, looking at me carefully. How are you? I'm fine, I answered, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Just tired. I understand. He put his hand on my shoulder. Come on, I'll take you home. No, I shook my head. Not home. To Ambrose's. He and the children need support right now. Percival nodded and walked me out of the restaurant. It was chilly outside, starting to rain lightly. We got into Percival's car and drove to Ambrose's house. On the way, I reflected on what had happened, about how one decision, to show the truth, had changed the lives of so many people. Ambrose learned that his wife had been cheating on him and was planning to leave him. The children learned that their mother was ready to leave them for a new life with another man. Lorelei lost a family she didn't appreciate. And me? What did I get? The satisfaction of revenge? No, it wasn't revenge. It was necessity, to protect my family from lies and betrayal. I did what I had to do, even though the price was high. When we pulled up to the Ambroses' house, I saw that all the windows were lit up. They were at home, going through the hardest night of their lives. "Thanks for everything, Percy," I said as I got out of the car. "You've been a true friend." "You're welcome, Tobias." He shook my hand. "Call me if you need any help." I nodded and walked toward the house. I took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell, gathering my strength. There were a lot of hard conversations ahead, a lot of tears and pain, but also the truth, without which there could be no healing. Ambrose opened the door almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting for me. "Dad," he looked exhausted, but there was determination in his eyes. "Come in." I entered the house that would soon no longer be Lorelai's home, a house where a new chapter in the life of my son and grandchildren would begin, a chapter without lies or betrayal. "I'm selling my house," I told Ambrose as we sat down in the parlor. "I'm leaving Danville." "What?" He looked at me in surprise. "Why? Because of all this?" "Partly," I nodded. "But mostly because it's time for a change. Too many memories in this city, too many ghosts of the past." "But where will you go?" I could hear the worry in his voice. "I haven't decided yet," I smiled. "Maybe to the sea. Agatha always wanted to live by the sea." Ambrose looked at me for a long time as if he were seeing me for the first time. "You did the right thing, Papa," he said at last, showing us the truth. It was painful, but necessary. "I know, son," I took his hand, "and I'm sorry for what happened." "Don't be," he smiled weakly. "It's better to know the truth than to live a lie, even if the truth breaks your heart." We sat in silence, holding hands, father and son going through a loss, he of a wife, I of a daughter-in-law. Although, to be honest, I didn't feel the loss. Lorelai had never been a part of my family, only a source of pain for my son. "Are the kids asleep?" I asked after a while. "Yes," Ambrose sighed. "They were shaken, especially Ottilia. She didn't stop crying until she fell asleep. It's going to be hard for them," I said, "but they're strong. They'll get through it." "I hope so." He rubbed his face with his hands, looking suddenly older than his years. "What should I tell them? About Lorelai, about the divorce, about all of it?" "The truth," I answered simply. "Not all the details, of course, but the basics. That their mother made a choice, and it wasn't in the family's favor. That you will always be with them, that they will always be loved." Ambrose nodded, considering my words. "What about Lorelai?" he asked. "What if she came back? Try to see the children?" "That's for you and the children to decide," I said. "But I think they need time now. Time to understand, time to forgive, if they're willing to forgive." "And you?" He looked at me. "Will you forgive her?" I wondered. "Forgive Lorelai for trying to ruin my son's life? For being willing to abandon my grandchildren? For planning to use me and my home for her own gain?" "No," I answered honestly. "I wouldn't forgive her, but not because of what she did to me. It's because of what she did to you and the children." Ambrose nodded, understanding. "Thank you, Papa," he said quietly, "for opening my eyes, for being there for me." "I'll always be there for you, son," I squeezed his hand. "Even if I go away, I'll always be here for you." We sat like that for a long time, talking about the past, about the future, about what lay ahead. About a new life without Lorelai, about how to support the children during this difficult time, about where I might move. Deep past midnight, when Ambrose finally fell asleep on the couch, exhausted by the emotions of the day, I quietly left the house and walked to my apartment. The night was cool but clear. The stars shone in the dark sky as if watching me. "You were right, Agatha," I said, looking up at the stars. "You always said that the truth would come out, no matter how deep you hid it." And I thought the stars blinked back, as if my Agatha were smiling down at me from the heavens, approving of my actions, supporting me as she always had. I continued my journey home, feeling strangely calm. Tomorrow a new chapter of my life will begin. I would sell the house, leave Danville, start over somewhere by the sea like Agatha had always dreamed. And Ambrose and the children, they'll manage. They're stronger than they look, and I'll always be there to support them no matter what happens. As for Lorelei, well, she made her choice, and now she'll have to live with the consequences. Without me, without Ambrose, without the children. Only with the bitter realization that she lost something precious in pursuit of the illusion of a new life.